I'm back. I want to go through my mind map with you. The mind map is 20th and 21st century literacy. I'm going to take you from the beginning, 1900, and take you all the way to the end, current day, 2011. So, starting at the top, I have a little schoolhouse, and from the schoolhouse there are two books. The two books represent the primary reading sources that students were using at that time, the New England Primer and the McGuffey Reader. The McGuffey Reader has a blue ribbon on it because it was the more popular of the two. In fact, sales were so high that they're equivalent to those of the Bible during that time. In 1908, you have Edmund Burke Huey coming in, and Edmund wrote this book, and he's saying that the philosophy and pedagogy of reading should actually be separated in two. We're going to have reading one branch, literature the other branch. Under the reading branch, we had researchers that come in: Judd, Gray, Parker, Horn, Thorndike. Thorndike is coined with the phrase reading is thinking. In 1930s to 1940s, you have the introduction of the radio. The radio is probably had concerns that we share in today's society with the computer, and that is that these devices, electronic devices, are taking children and adults away from reading novels, from reading literature. In the 1930s and 40s, you have the development of the Dick and Jane series, which is basically a series that uses the method of seeing and saying. Also have the introduction of the round robin reading strategy, and you're probably all familiar with that. The teacher starts reading and then passes it on to the next child in the circle. That child reads for a while, passes it on to the next child, until it goes all the way around and everyone's had a chance to read. Rosenblatt is one of the researchers during that time, a prominent educator and psychologist, and she is known probably for one of the contributing constructivism theories that we're reading about or should be reading about soon. In the 1950s, Flesch writes a book called Why Johnny Can't Read, and he looked in depth as the problems with the old way, this way of basically the basal readers and dividing the reading and the writing and the literature. And he said, let's go back to the old ways. And the old ways is basically drilling in the ABCs, the phonics, and the sight words. Different strategies started being practiced. DRA, which is the directed reading activity. And basically the teacher in this strategy used schema to do before reading activities. And then that followed into vocabulary development, looking at the vocab, and also comprehension strategies, and then finally following that up with an activity. It's equivalent to, in my mind, before, during, and after reading strategies to understand and develop comprehension. And then you have the SQ3R strategy, which is basically survey, question, and 3 R's would represent reading, reciting, and reviewing. Goodman is a researcher of the 60s, and he coined the words miscue and cues. So miscues are errors, and basically they're an interference in what the listener expected. He was very influential during this time. He looked at the cues of graphophonics, semantics, and syntactics. 1967, you have Michal's reading principles developed, and in this reading, she basically looks at how to end the debate. What is the best way to teach children how to read? And some of the things that she said is that children need to be taught in small groups, that it's going to take a while for kids to get this all together with the phonics and the reading and the fluency, etc. That kids should be taught 50 to 100 sight words, and then we should concentrate on phonics. Reading literature should be quality, high quality, and it should look at children's interests, and the content should represent things that kids can identify with. In the 1970s, down with Dick and Jane, we're not going to do that anymore. We have a Brazilian researcher who comes in. His name is Paulo Freire, and he wrote a book called The Pedagogy of the oppressed. And in this book, he looked at the roles that school plays in the inequality of learning and reading, and a lot of concerns that we have even still today about the cultural competence that we expect and we practice in the school, and just being sensitive towards those issues. We also have the development of whole language during the 70s, and during that time we have this idea of social learning. We have, again, the quality of the book should be high, teaching children through themes, teachable moments, that learning should be child-centered. And one of the biggest researchers at that time was this guy, Frank Smith. And he basically looked deeply within understanding reading. 1980s was a turbulent decade. We have a reading war going on. In the reading war, there are two camps. There's a camp of whole language, and the other camp is phonics. And how do we go about resolving this? Well, Pat Cunningham was a researcher during that time, along with Adams, and the basically understanding was that there needs to be a balance. And so a balance was achieved that was accepted. 1990s is the end of the reading wars. 1998, you have the legislation coming into place. Some of the things that were looked at and the acts that were developed were the Workforce Investment Act. And in the Workforce Investment Act, you have basically Congress looking at the skills that are needed for writing and reading and speaking, both in the family and society. It's going beyond literacy, and to see how people can basically contribute to their communities. In 1999, you have the Reading Excellence Program that goes into play as well. And there we're looking at teaching children to read by the 3rd grade. You should be providing support, anything that we need to do in order for that child or children to meet those goals. That we have to consider early intervention when needed, and that reading should be based on scientific research. By 2000, we have the National Reading Panel, and here we looked at the guided, repeated reading is considered positive, along with phonics, vocabulary study, and guided oral reading. From there, I'm going to teach you a little bit about the International Reading Association position statement, which basically says that we need to honor kids. And George Bush's policy came in, No Child Left Behind, and it was passed in 2002. My particular area of study was the 2009 Literacy Research Association, which looked at basically how multicultural and multilingual should be incorporated, considered in reading programs. And I was just at a workshop that looked at cultural competence and how we need to be sensitive to all these things in not just English and reading, but across the curriculum. Very interesting program that I think is becoming again, a widely recognized contribution to the child and the learning process. Finally, in 2011, we had the Core Curriculum Standards of New Jersey, and in this we're looking at basically the skills that children need from kindergarten to grade 12 in order to contribute to the workforce or to be able to go into a college university program. And those standards, those goalposts that we have to meet as educators in preparing children, and that students have to meet in order to go on in their education. So there we go. And it looks a little like this. Hope you enjoyed it.